Total NBA 96, otherwise known as NBA Shootout in North America, was well received among critics and even players alike when it released on the console early on in the year of 1996, as it was one of the first true basketball simulation games to be released on the PlayStation, and it was praised for its motion capture animations, great use of graphics, physics, and just the overall look and general feel and the atmosphere that it provided that was very authentic to NBA fans and just fans of basketball in general. So much so that it was given some of the most highest rating reviews across the board for games of any kind of its time. Now, it's not to say that it's perfect, it doesn't come without its glitches. It does have certain elements where games reviewers did criticise certain elements with regard to some of the sound effects and some of the various animation glitches that can appear from time to time, and the game can have a certain amount of slowdown depending on certain elements that happen throughout play. But aside from that, what it was able to produce for its time, it was capable of pushing the PlayStation further beyond what was capable of its original limits. But the real attractive appeal to the game was its massive selection of player rosters that was reflective of the 1995-96 NBA season. And while it was considered one of the best games in its category, it was still somewhat outshadowed by NBA Live 96 that would have been seen on the likes of earlier consoles, as that was definitely a true authentic experience. I remember a friend of mine having NBA Live 96 on a Super Nintendo, and that was a phenomenal game, really atmospheric. It captured the whole essence of the NBA tournament way more than any other basketball game pretty much I'd ever played, maybe bar NBA Jam. Plus it had a massively great soundtrack as well. Like, for a Super Nintendo game, that soundtrack is up there definitely with the best of them. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. But Total NBA was considered to be that popular for its time, more so in Europe of all places, even more so than North America, where basketball is at its most popular. The game was also ranked 88 out of the top 100 games of all time for that year, which is quite crazy when you think about it. But you can clearly see why, because it was one of those type of games that came out at the perfect time. When we look at the transition from 2D to 3D games, it was one of those games that really showcased the true nature of 3D games development and how it could be influenced moving forward. Like, when we look at the polygon based characters, it was very, very detailed. When you look at the environments, even the court, the sound effects, just the overall general look and feel. Like, when we look at the designs of even the floors and the arenas that you're playing in, each arena is unique to the team that you're playing as. You'll have all of their logos, like in this case here, you'll have likes of the Chicago Bulls. So it's very authentic to the real thing. That was what was so cool about the game. It was that it had all of those visual aesthetics, and I'm going to be honest, for its time it really was a good looking game, and it still in many ways does hold up well today. While it does feel a little bit on the clunky side compared to other basketball games, for its time it was something else. It really was. But yeah, there are glitches in it, don't get me wrong. Like, say if you're doing dunks, and sometimes what can happen, as you'll see, there are instances where, say, a player will do a dunk with the ball and he could be behind the basket or behind the pane of glass and he'll still dunk the ball through it, like as if it's not even there. So that can cause a lot of confusion as well. Like, it's not perfect. It was one of the first games of its kind to go fully 3D in that respect, so there are always going to be subtle issues and gripes with it here and there, but it has many characteristics that just appeal to fans of the sport. Even players that weren't fans of basketball or that even grew up with it would quickly become fans due to this game. It was extremely popular. It was just one of those games that was a perfect addition to the launch period, or the first year of the PlayStation's launch cycle. It sold in good numbers, it was popular by fans, it made new fans of the sport. Like, what was not to like about it? Plus you had all of the licensed players, well, most of the licensed players. You didn't have Michael Jordan in it, but you had Dennis Rodman, you had Scottie Pippen, Luke Longley, Ron Harper. If you look at the Chicago Bulls lineup, you had Patrick Ewing for the New York Knicks. Like, pretty much every character player for their individual teams of that time were there. You had all of their proper stats, attributes. Like, it was a true authentic experience in many regards. Like, even when I go back to my first true experience with this game, it actually came in the form of the Demo 1 CD around the very first time I'd ever played the PlayStation. While I had played a couple of games before it, when I got my mate to try out the Demo 1 CD, like, it was full of other games, like with demos or rolling demos of Ridge Race, or there was like Rapid Reload, Tekken, and you had playable demos of Loaded, Battle Arena Toshinden, Destruction Derby, Jumping Flash, among many others, but there was also a rolling video demo of Total NBA 96, and I remember he put that on and he was like, dude, you have to have a look at this, and I was completely blown away by how good this actually looked. Like, for me at the time, I had played a demo not long before it with Formula 1, which was obviously a racing game, and I couldn't believe the level of depth of detail with that game and the authentic nature of it, with the sounds and the commentary and the whole lot, and it just completely blew me away. But then when I seen this here demo, and the fact is that you were seeing like real life basketball, because one of my good friends that grew up across the road from me in the same street was mad into his basketball when we were kids, and he was a huge Chicago Bulls fan, so we'd always be talking about basketball and just mad into it. And like I said, he used to take over a Super Nintendo when we were younger, and we'd be playing NBA Live 96, which we used to have a blast with. But when I seen this game and I seen how detailed it was, and with the authentic sound effects, even real life commentary and music and everything, it was like you were watching a true basketball experience on your TV, but that you could feel like you were part of the action in many regards. It really was something else. Like, it really was a sight to behold at that time. But I think it was one of those experiences, because for me it was the first time I'd ever played the PlayStation in all respects, but to get to play some of the early games, like I played Shockwave Assault and Resident Evil, which, as we all know, Resident Evil is my number one favourite game of all time. I had as much fun, and I was completely blown away by the level of quality, even just with some of these demos, as much as the actual full games themselves. Like, I kid you not, like, it really was crazy what you were seeing. Especially up until that point, I had never played a PlayStation in my life. All I'd ever played was the likes of a Super Nintendo, and like in my home house with my 4 brothers, all we had was a Sega Master System growing up, because we were broke. We couldn't afford any new systems at that time, so the only way you got to play any of these games at all was if a friend had them and you just happened to call around to their house to play them. So when one of my other friends got the PlayStation for Christmas, that was it. Like, it really did change everything. I have mentioned that previously on other videos on the channel. I'll make sure to link to them in the description. And it's just, yeah, it was a phenomenal time. It's just to be part of that transition period, to see in full effect the differences between older systems and that current generation of systems, was just truly astounding. Nothing else was like it at all at that time. And if anything, for me personally, it is the best generation to be involved with video games, because we will never see that again. Because nowadays, when you look at modern systems, yes, don't get me wrong, graphics are phenomenal, sound effects, everything is just on another level, but we've come to expect and almost come to, how would you put it, we've probably become complacent in our expectations in what we want, because we always want the newest thing, and because of the quality of stuff that's being produced today, we nearly always know what to expect before it's actually come out. And what ends up happening is we end up setting our expectations way higher than they actually should be. We actually over exceed that, and we actually disappoint ourselves because of our ridiculously high and overbearing expectations, actually unrealistic expectations, more to the point. But with this period of games, there truly was nothing else like it out there, because most of us growing up, and many of you I'd imagine watching this video, never expected to see what they were seeing or witnessing at that time. Like, we had never seen anything like this transition ever in history of video games, and we will never see it again. To see these games playing out in the way that they did, to have graphics to look as good as they did, even though the PlayStation, when we look back, right, games haven't aged as well as you would think, but back then it was just a masterpiece in what you were seeing, and it left a lasting impact. It definitely did on me, and it definitely did on people that I know and grew up with. And for many of you guys watching the videos here, and I've been chatting with many of yous in the comments, and a lot of yous relate to that as well, and we can have really good conversations on that. There's just so many things unique to this console with these games and demos, and games like this here that just really stood out. Many of the games that went on to be popular like this were games that nobody would ever even consider playing back in the day, but somehow people took an instant liking to it, and it just ended up being one of the most favourite games ever. That was the power of the PlayStation in many respects, how it was able to draw you in and bring you into different categories and genres and different gameplay types that you never would have even considered before. Was just truly astounding. And for me, this was definitely one of those games. The first time I ever seen that demo really kind of set the mark of what was yet to come, and everything after that was just amazing. It was just, for me, it was definitely the most exciting time personally to be involved with video games. Like even years later, I did go out and buy the game. I got it cheap enough in a local store. I had that game for ages, and I kid you not, I put a lot of hours into the game. I know the game had been out a few years at the time, but I did not care because I always wanted to play it and own it. So eventually when I did get the opportunity to get it, because at that point it was quite rare to find a copy of it, or at least a copy in good condition, so you better believe that I put a lot of time into it. And yeah, I always have great time for this game. Great memories. Right, it's clunky by today's standards, and even going back to play it now, it was a bit of a struggle to try and figure things out, but it's still as much fun. Once you put a bit of time and patience into this is definitely a game that's reflective of its time, but it's a really good game all the same. Still looks great in my opinion, and it's definitely a really good early experience for the PlayStation in terms of sports games. Just a phenomenal experience overall. So I would love to know your thoughts and experiences of Total NBA 96 or NBA Shootout, depending on whichever region you were in when it came out. And what do you think of this unique experience and the early transition period from games that we're seeing moving forward in that current generation on the PlayStation? It'd be interesting to hear whatever stories you do have of the game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other unique basketball games, or even games that were released way back during the early months and years of the PlayStation's life cycle, then you can check out the playlists here on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.